Before smartphones and constant notifications, the park was where everything happened. I grew up in a small suburban town where parents kicked you out of the house after dinner and expected you back when the streetlights came on. If you wanted privacy from adults, you went to the park. That's just how it was. Ours sat at the edge of the neighborhood, tucked between a walking trail and a stretch of trees that ran along a shallow creek. During the day, it was normal enough. Kids, joggers, families. At night, it felt like a completely different place. This happened when I was 14. It was late summer, one of those nights where it's still warm even after the sun goes down. My friend Josh, my cousin Micah, and I rode our bikes to the park around 10 p.m., just planning to hang out for a bit before heading home. We weren't doing anything crazy, just sitting on the swings, talking about school, music, stupid stuff that felt important at the time. The park lights only covered the main playground area. Everything beyond that faded into darkness. The walking trail disappeared into the trees, and the creek was nothing more than a faint sound of moving water. After maybe 20 minutes, Josh stopped swinging and said, "Do you hear that?" We all froze. At first I thought it was just the creek, but then I heard it too. Footsteps on gravel, slow, deliberate footsteps coming from the trail. We leaned forward, squinting into the dark, expecting to see a jogger or someone walking their dog, but no one came into the light. The footsteps stopped just before the edge of the playground, right where the darkness swallowed everything. We waited. Nothing. Mike laughed nervously and said it was probably someone messing with us. We tried to shake it off and went back to talking, but none of us really relaxed. Every few seconds, I found myself glancing toward the trail without realizing it. A couple minutes later, the footsteps started again. This time they were closer. Not running, not rushing. Just slow steps crunching against the gravel, then stopping again, always just outside the light. Josh finally called out, "Hello?" No response. Instead, we heard something else. Breathing, not heavy, not loud, just enough to notice once you were paying attention. It sounded close, like someone standing just beyond the swings. That's when I got the feeling that we weren't being watched from a distance anymore. It felt like someone was right there, choosing not to step forward. Mike stood up and said we should leave. None of us argued. We grabbed our bikes and started riding toward the exit path that led back to the neighborhood. As we passed the edge of the playground lights, I glanced over my shoulder. For a split second, I saw a figure standing near the trail entrance. I couldn't make out details, just a tall outline, completely still facing us. It didn't move when we rode past. It didn't chase us. It just stood there. We rode hard all the way back to my house, locked the bikes in the yard, and sat on the back steps trying to catch our breath. We joked about it at first, trying to convince ourselves it was nothing. Maybe someone messing around, maybe a late-night walker. Then someone knocked on the side gate. We all jumped. The knock came again, slow and firm, like whoever it was wasn't in a hurry. I asked who it was, my voice cracking despite my attempt to sound calm. A man's voice answered, "Did you boys just come from the park?" Something about the way he said it made my stomach drop. Not angry, not friendly, just flat. Josh whispered that we shouldn't answer. Mike shook his head slowly. I stepped closer to the gate and peeked through the gap. A man stood there under the dim yard light, middle-aged, wearing dark clothes, hands at his sides. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't frowning either. He was just staring straight at the gate, like he already knew where I was standing. I told him no. There was a pause. Then he said, "That's funny. I thought I recognized one of you." None of us responded. After a few seconds, he stepped back from the gate and walked away down the street, disappearing into the darkness between houses. We didn't sleep much that night. We avoided that park for months afterward. Eventually, life moved on. School started. New routines replaced old ones. The story became something we laughed about when we were older, something creepy but distant. But even now, Years later, I still think about how that figure never stepped into the light, and how the man at the gate already knew where we'd been. Because whatever was in that park that night didn't feel random. It felt like we weren't supposed to notice it, and did anyway. I never thought a short walk through the park would become something I still think about years later. I live in a quiet town where nothing ever really happens. The kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked and kids ride bikes until dark without anyone worrying. The park sits right in the center of town, surrounded by houses on 3 sides and a thin line of woods on the 4th. During the day, it's full of joggers, parents with strollers, and older people feeding ducks by the pond. At night, it empties out fast. This happened a few years ago, late spring, when the air was cool but not cold. I had been having trouble sleeping, so around 11 p.m. I decided to take a walk to clear my head. I'd done it dozens of times before. The park was only 5 minutes from my house, and I told myself I wouldn't be long. When I entered, the lights along the main path were on, but they didn't do much against the darkness between the trees. Everything felt muted. No wind, no insects, no distant traffic. Just the sound of my own footsteps on the pavement. For the first few minutes, it was peaceful, almost calming. I remember thinking that the park felt bigger at night, like the shadows stretched everything out. I was halfway around the main loop when I noticed someone ahead of me. They were standing near the edge of the path, partially under a light. At first, I assumed it was another late-night walker, but as I got closer, I realized they weren't moving at all, just standing there, facing away from me. I slowed down instinctively. When I was about 20 feet away, they stepped off the path and disappeared into the darkness between the trees. That should have been my sign to leave. Instead, I kept walking, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe someone taking a shortcut. Maybe someone waiting for a friend. I passed the spot where they'd been standing and glanced into the trees, but I couldn't see anything. A minute later, I heard footsteps behind me. I stopped. The footsteps stopped too. I waited, listening. My heart started to pound in my ears. After a few seconds, I convinced myself I was overreacting and started walking again. The footsteps returned immediately. They weren't loud. They weren't rushed. Just steady, matching my pace exactly. Every time I slowed, they slowed. Every time I sped up, they stayed the same distance behind me. I didn't turn around. I reached the section of the park where the path curves away from the lights and runs alongside the tree line. It was darker there, and the feeling in my chest told me I shouldn't go any farther. I decided to turn back. As soon as I turned around, the footsteps stopped. The path behind me was empty. No one. I stood there for a moment, staring into the darkness, trying to calm myself down. Then, from somewhere to my left, inside the trees, I heard a branch snap, slowly, deliberately. I didn't wait to confirm anything else. I started walking back toward the entrance, keeping my eyes forward, forcing myself not to run. The whole time I felt it, that unmistakable pressure of being watched. When I reached the park entrance and stepped onto the sidewalk, the feeling eased just a little. I looked back one last time. Near the edge of the trees, just beyond where the light faded, someone was standing. They weren't trying to hide. They weren't moving, just standing there, facing the path. I went straight home and locked the door behind me. I told myself it was probably just someone hanging out in the park. Someone harmless. Someone real. I tried to forget about it. But over the next few weeks, strange things started happening. I'd hear footsteps outside my window late at night, but when I looked, there was no one there. I'd catch movement in my peripheral vision while walking past the park during the day, but when I turned my head, nothing would be there. Once, I found muddy footprints near the sidewalk leading away from the park, stopping abruptly at the street. I never saw a face, never heard a voice, just that presence. Eventually, I stopped walking through the park altogether. Even during the day, I stayed on the opposite sidewalk. Life moved on, but the feeling never really left. Even now, Years later, if I drive past that park at night, I don't look toward the trees, because a part of me still wonders if whoever was there that night never actually left. Maybe they're still standing just beyond the light, waiting for the next person who thinks a quiet park is safe after dark. Some places don't change when the sun comes up. They just learn how to wait.